We interrupt this incredibly awesome music to bring you some incredibly awesome political talk on Damn Radio.
Hello, good evening, welcome. I am Samuel Trapp. This is International Flavor. You are listening to Damn Radio. And here I am. I'm coming to you live from Florida today, and I'm really not feeling well. I feel even worse than I did yesterday, but there's so much stuff going on that there's no way I can just avoid it. Do you remember last night? Anyway, if you feel like calling in tonight, please do. That would be at 573-746-8020. And I would be pleased to take your call and chat with you about whatever you wish to talk about. But my head is booming, and let's hope that I can keep a coherent stream of thought going there. That would be very nice. But I wanted to start with, I wanted to continue with where we were last night. So there's still this daily or continuous update around this Trump peace plan and all of the stuff that's going on with it. And people are still coming unglued on this. And there's been a lot of news on it today. There's been a lot of stupidity on it too. And remember, I told you last night that at 2:00, at 2 minutes after the new day began on the 25th, the Washington Post was reporting a few things, and European Council President Antonio Costa said that the EU has to play an active role. He said, here's his quote. His quote was, "It's clear that the issues that concern the EU, such as sanctions, enlargement, or assets," he's talking about the Russian money, "require the full involvement and decision by the EU." Now, why? You know, if Russia and America agree upon where the money's going to go, who needs them? And there's been Lavrov gave a snippy response earlier today at where the Washington Post cited an unnamed EU diplomat. Remember me, I finished with this last night. This was the last that I had for you last night, because it was the last update that they had provided on this minute by minute, blow by blow tracking of the alleged peace formula, the peace talks. And this one was the Washington Post has cited an unnamed diplomat as saying the issue is that we don't have a real clear picture of what's being negotiated between the U.S. and Ukraine. And then that was the last one that I got to you. And then this morning it started up again, and I've been following it all day. It's 3:00 in the morning, Greenwich Mean Time. So right about as my show was ending last night, I would say, or a little bit before, but it didn't show. Well, whatever it is, it was just either right after or right before. And Russia's investment envoy and negotiator on Ukraine, Kirill Dmitriev, blasted the biased critics of President Trump and his peace plan. He condemned those who profit from the war. And there are too many of those, far too many of those. And he said, not just the deep state military industrial complex folks, but the media and the opinion makers. War profiteers sabotage peace with unrealistic solutions, is what he said on X. And then the Czech president came out and said some things, because people know what's going on the ground. There have been lies all day long today that Ukraine is all ever present in Pokrovsk and Mirnograd and wherever they are, and I don't believe that. I mean, I don't believe it at all. I've been following this since the very beginning, and nobody who knows anything believes this either. There may be an attempt to weasel their way back in. Now, what I saw on Telegram today was a video of 3 or 4 Ukrainian soldiers going past Russia everywhere. Eastern Europe basically, but they're all over Russia too. They were all over the Soviet Union. When you come into a new city, they always have these signs that if you're familiar with where the Lake Ozark sign is, when you drive up the hill going in on the new freeway and the new bypass, there's a sign that says Lake Ozark up there. They have those in just about every town in Russia, and there's one, of course, in Pokrovsk. And when I saw a video of some of the something on Telegram where there were some Ukrainian soldiers going around that sign, and there was a guy who was reading it, and he said, based on the graffiti, he said, I think this is a little older, which is kind of interesting because there's graffiti all over this thing. Russians positive, Russian negative, and stuff. And I don't know. I'm not there, obviously. But there was a commentary that they were saying they don't think that that them being by the sign on the outskirts of Pokrovsk means that they're in possession of Pokrovsk. And nobody can say when that video was done. Obviously, you don't need geolocation on it or anything like that, but it doesn't have a time period when it was taken. You can never necessarily verify that those are taken on the days that they are taken. And there's a huge propaganda effort right now on the side of Ukraine to try and make sure to show that they are taking over, that they are winning, because nobody, they do not wish to, the government anyway, in Europe anyway, they do not wish to capitulate. And Trump's 28-point peace plan for them is capitulation. So, at any rate, that this is all of this is a very real propaganda war, and you got to be careful what you're getting. The Czech president came on, and his name is Piotr Pavel. He told Polish news channel that any peace deal shouldn't resemble Munich 2.0, which referred to the 1938 agreement in which France and Britain allowed Nazi Germany to annex parts of Czechoslovakia. And he said, however, that Ukrainians and their EU supporters have to be realistic and see clearly what is happening on the ground. And he said that the loss of territory is possible, and he stressed that Ukraine shouldn't officially recognize Russia's borders. But he also acknowledges that it wasn't Czechoslovakia that gave up Czechoslovakian land, really. It was France and Britain telling them what they were going to do when it was allowed. So then, about 6 o'clock in the morning, about 3 o'clock in the morning, our time, U.S. Secretary Dan Driscoll was going to hold talks with Russian representatives in Abu Dhabi, UAE. Secretary Driscoll met with members of the Russian delegation Monday night for several hours, and he's scheduled to meet with them again on Tuesday throughout the day to discuss peace and rapidly move the peace negotiation forward. But CBS didn't say who else is in the Washington delegation and who is representing Moscow. And along with Rubio and Witkoff, Driscoll took part with Ukraine in Geneva, in the discussions on Ukraine. So Russia then came back a little bit later and said, and her name, she's a chairperson named Valentina Matviyenko. She said the U.S. is interested in settling the conflict. And she said, I personally believe that an agreement on Ukraine is possible, and I believe in the sincerity of Trump's intentions. I believe he wants to end this conflict, she said to Moskovsky Komsomolets newspaper. And according to her, Western Europe still hopes to defeat Russia on the battlefield. And, that is, this hope is still the main instrument wielded by the party, which is all of them, and I thought I liked how she put that when I included it. She also said, whenever any signs of something that could form the basis for a settlement appear, they, Europeans, immediately get together and torpedo peace efforts, turning any plan for peace into a plan for continuing the war, she argues. And, that's true. And it's been all day back and forth on this. U.S. and U.S. is preventing. This came out at a little bit after that. U.S. is preventing the EU and UK from being involved in the peace process. We are not on board. We are trying to get on board, but it is being met for the moment with rejections from the Americans, said the source. And again, they never named the source. And there's a sense of mystery around the current phase of negotiations on Washington's peace plan. And then there was a rare meeting between the country's top leaders, and then they showed Rubio. So here, when was this? That's just a file photo. But Rubio is refusing to hold bilateral meetings with the EU's foreign policy chief, Kaya Kallas. Well, I wouldn't either. She's a moron, and he's better than her. But he's neocon. The neocons have grabbed hold of our Trumpster pretty well here, and I'm not on board with that. So we shall see what we can see here. Let us see what we can do. Hello, kind sir. How are you today?
Fine, thanks. I'm glad to hear that you and your Volkswagen diesel made it back to Florida.
I traded that diesel in ages ago. I just told you the story about it. They paid me to give it back.
What do you drive now?
Well, I got a Altima, and I have a pickup truck.
A Nissan Altima.
Yep.
Yeah, my son-in-law has one of those. It's got 184,000 miles on it. That is the best vehicle. It's just reliable AF. It's just a really good car. So I'm a big fan of the Nissan, and that distracted me from what do you think the best possible outcome is for this whole Russia Ukraine thing? I mean, what in your mind, because I value your opinion, what do you think is the best case scenario?
Man, I keep getting twisted back and forth, and they keep getting yanked so far to one way and so far to the other. But the Ukrainians are getting screwed here, and the only people that are benefiting from this are the wealthy and the criminals at the top of the Ukrainian politics in the U.S. and all of the same old a-holes in Europe, right? But the people of Ukraine are getting screwed. And the best outcome, this is really going to sound harsh, but I think we ought to cut them off completely, cut off intelligence, cut off money, cut off weapons, cut off all of it, because they are being slaughtered over there. And maybe it's only a war of an attrition. I admit I'm not on the battleground, I'm not there, but I've been following this pretty damn close. And I certainly do not see it. And I believe that this is what our fearless neocon leaders are doing right now. They're going over and telling them, look, you're either going to lose this now or you're going to lose more next summer, because look where you are compared to last summer when you refused all these deals. Remember last November and last October, old old Z Monster was over at the UN, and he went to Sweden or I'm sorry, he went to Switzerland trying to push his peace plan and then his victory plan, and all of it is the same old crap. Russia, give us back Crimea. Russia, give us back all of this stuff, and they just keep losing more, and they're
Well,
going to keep losing more, and so it's not going to end well for them. And if we are going to force them to do something, I hope that's what we are doing now. But it appears to be the exact same pile of crap. The same old idiots think they're going to force Russia to do something, and they're not going to.
yeah, it's a complete culture war, in my view. And I mean, I listen to you, not every night, but several nights a week, and you're in tune. I mean, I really understand that you know what the hell you're talking about. And then I listen to some other people too, Alex Jones. I listen to John Solomon. I listen to Breitbart. I listen to the Gateway Pundit, a lot of different sources. And you are one of many, and JR too. And so here's what trips my effing trigger, Sam. These people, and I'm up in the city right now. I'm loving life. I like it better down there because it's more, serene and not as much traffic and all that crap. But I'm up here right now, loving, my kids, my two daughters and a son, and their significant others, and my beautiful granddaughter. So I'm loving life. I'm not trying to complain. I'm just going to point something out, that these people that are up here in this city flying these Ukrainian effing flags don't have a clue what's going on. They think they're standing up for democracy, and this little tin pot dictator, this little miniature little penis playing piano player, is a leftist a leftist commie, insubordinate, freakish thing, that they're trying to dump on us, man, and trying to make us think that it's okay to, and he's the same little MFer that canceled the elections and that shut down the right wing religious objections to what that little Democrat, socialist, communist, punk ass prick is doing. He's no good. And that is what they're trying to normalize in the United States. That's what these people that are on these streets in Johnson County and Jackson County and in their, highfalutin neighborhoods thinking that they're supporting some sort of social justice. These MFers are dumber than F, man, and they are going to sell us. They and their overly funded NGO shit is going to sell us down the river unless we stop them right effing now. All these little grannies and grampies, these boomers that think they're going to, save the world, they are the doomsday seekers. We need to pursue a plan of peace for the future for our children, not these doomsday seeker, blue-haired, pink-haired, bitch-ass, leftist, communist, creep-ass Fs that are going to die in 10 years. They need to shut up and go away.
Well, they need to change their way of thinking, and that'll never happen. And it's all of these people that are living in the past that still think that in some great war, excuse me, a really scratchy throat tonight, that in some great war that we are going to do what we did in World War II.
We're too lazy for that now. Those days are gone.
Well, I don't know about that, but it's much more equal than it was back then, at least from the battlefield perspective. And if anything, we are outclassed in a number of areas. And there are a couple of people that I listen to regularly that say China is a paper tiger, Russia is a paper tiger. Remember when Trump put all that he was saying several months ago, Russia is a paper tiger, I got news for you. They are not. And what they are doing in Ukraine is a war of attrition. It's of small advances, and it's very technical. It's all done, but they do it repeatedly, over and over and over. And now it's like a you know how you what is it called, familiarity, or you get into a habit forming
It's the Stockholm
scenario.
syndrome. Stockholm syndrome.
Well, I don't know about that. That's usually when you end up liking your captors, I think. But
Well, that's the same. Where's the difference? I mean, describe the difference.
well, but
between...
the difference is in the habit of what the Russian military is doing, right? So they go into a city and they cut off all the supply lines. They bomb all the outer rings. They cut off all the ability for anything to get there. They blow up any air defense. They bomb the shit out of it for several days, and then they go house to house and liquidate the people. And they put them in. They call them cauldrons. That they put them in a kotyolok, and these guys are put in a pot, and then they close the lid on the top of them, and they're encircled, and people give up. And you'll see them all over Telegram. You'll see all of these what do you call it, surrenders of all of these Ukrainian guys. And all they do is then you see them saying horrible things about what they did as soldiers. It's but the Russians they're going to keep advancing, and like I have been saying for at least 2 to 3 years, is they are patient. They're very patient, and they will proceed as slow as they have to go. You know, okay, so like Lindsey Graham's of the world, the Mitch McConnell's of the world go, oh geez, Russia, if they were going to win, they should be just rolling over Ukraine. Well, not if they want to save their own men. They shouldn't. You know, they should try to take care of them. But it's a meat. They call them the meat lines in Ukraine. Those guys are nothing but meat. They don't have any vehicles anymore. They don't have any artillery anymore. All they got are minimal drones, and they hope that people give them long-range weapons they can bomb inside of Russia. And it's depressing because the all over their own channels, even in Ukraine, these guys aren't getting any training. Zelensky said a week ago that he needs 40,000 new soldiers a month. Why? If you're not losing, why do you need 40,000 more soldiers every month? Why are you beating the crap out of people in the streets and dragging them to the front lines if you're winning? You know, if you have these people, why can't you get them into the military? Because they don't want to die, and they know it's the meat lines. So there's nothing, not a whole lot positive going on the from the Ukrainian army side, and I believe that. Well, I know that all over the place. You know, I told you last night and even the night before about the broken pen incident with Yermak breaking his pen because Rubio was telling him the truth and going, "Look, don't go pumping sunshine up our hands. We know you're losing. We know Pokrovsk and Mirnograd are horror stories for you, and we know you can't resupply your lines. You need to end this, and we're going to force you to end this now." And so there's nothing good for them to look forward to, except if they continue to fight next year, it'll be even worse. And they're in for a horror story of a winter, I'll tell you that.
Well, here's the only thing I have to say. It seems to me like they're over there. I mean, the people here, the leftists, you know, blue-haired, pink-haired, whatever, radical, you know, whatever they are saying they're standing up for democracy, which is absolutely the antithesis of what Volodymyr Zelensky and the Ukrainian government is supporting. They've got martial law. They have no free and fair elections. They are silencing their opposition, and opposition meaning Catholic, Christian believers, and that way of thinking. So that country is the absolute antithesis of democracy. And then these old Nancy Pelosi's and Chuck Schumer's and all the leftists, and maybe a few of the Rhino, right-wing AIPAC money-taking, fake-ass phonies are into too. But they are absolutely demeaning the definition of democracy, is what they stand for over here, day after day after day. I just can't understand how people on this side of the ocean can be so brainwashed, so disillusioned.
Well, they are, and it sure as hell isn't. It's not for democracy, because there isn't any over there. That's for sure.
Yeah. We're in the middle of a Cloward Piven, Smith Monk, absolute propagandist fight for our free way of thinking. That's in the bottom line. That's what it is, because they've got it turned upside down. Everything that's white is black. Everything that's left is right. Everything that's up is down. It is a giant fucking conundrum right now, man. And the reason they can do that is because the Federal Reserve and all those money pushing bitches and the national healthcare industrial complex and the military, and they're all pushing the fact that the dollar is so important. The dollar is done. We have got to move on from the dollar and defeat the Fed. The Fed has got to go. When we do that, there's going to be a Nasara and a Jasara. Look it up. Nasara and Jasara. And when you see that, Sam, I think you're going to absolutely buy into what I'm telling you right now. These Federal Reserve bankers and these Rothschilds and these Chases and JP Morgan, they're going to rue the day, bro. They are going to rue the day. So just
you are pretty positive about that. And I know some other people are positive about that, but I'm not as positive as the rest of you on that. I am.
Jump on board.
I think
bro.
they're so.
What do you have? Do you have to lose? What do you have to lose?
Well, nothing. And I'm hopeful, but I'm just saying that I don't believe the deep state goes down just because a president's on our side. I don't even want to say on our side, because he's not. He's on his own side. But but he is acting, I believe, in most cases, with the vision of America that he has in the future front and foremost. And he thinks what he's doing is best for. He's not fake. Let's put it that way. He's not one of those guys that says something. I mean, he might change his mind back and forth, which drives me crazy. But he's also listening to things as he goes along. He's hearing and he's reacting in real time, and I don't think he's fake at all. The rest of them, it's all a line of crap from beginning to end. And he at least is a real person, like him or hate him, he's a real person.
Yeah, I didn't really mean to call to talk about, Trump, but my point was this, that the very thing that we've been, for decades, like JR says, the very thing we've been fighting for against communism, right, isn't the thing that we fought for the last 150 years against, a monarch, actually 250, 300 years, against a monarchy and against communism and against, we're all equal, but some are more equal than others, like George Orwell said in 1984. Isn't that Isn't that what we're fighting for? I mean, when I say we, I don't know, Sam. I'm betting, my chips are 90% that you're on the right side. I don't think you're a bad guy. I think you're a good guy. But who knows? Nobody ever knows. If you're just an embedded spy over here or something, but I'd like to think that I'm a good judge of character, and I think you're on the right side, and you're just promoting different points of view and perspectives. And here's the last thing I want to say: that we're over here fighting against communism and for democracy, and yet the guy that these Pelosi's and these Schumers and all these stupid blue-haired leftist Fs are in on, the guy is not in favor of democracy. He is ruling by autocracy. He has banned elections in the country that we're supposed to be fighting for democracy in, against the Russian communism. It's a giant boondoggle, bro. It's a giant. We are being bamboozled, back over the head, punch in the nuts. We are being bamboozled. If they think that we're fighting against the Russian communist aggression and letting this little short dick freaking creep run us. He is such a disgusting, vile little person, and we're letting him. The United States right now is letting him bitch slap the F out of us, and it's embarrassing.
I don't know that I go as far as you even on that, but he's not one of the good guys in my opinion. And I think that one of the biggest lies that the American public has been sold for the last 30 years, well, even before that, really, to be truthful, but from the collapse of the Soviet Union, okay, so communism is gone. Russia could be our friends, right? There's no reason they couldn't have been. But the big bad bear, we needed the big bad bear. So the biggest lie that has been told for more than 30 years is that the Russian bear is going to take over Europe. It's going to take over the planet. It isn't doing any of that. None of the above. But we will put, we will put NATO everywhere, that we have done. And so Russia is not your enemy, and they never were. And,
exactly.
And I hope Trump can pull his head out of his rear end. And, well, seems like he is, but he's also on board with a bunch of these neocon morons that I have zero use for. But there appear to be more and more on the us side that want to stop interfering in geopolitics to the level that we are. And I don't like it at any level. So I very much appreciate your call.
That's the reason I call in, Sam, because I think you've got a very, very educated and intelligent point of view, and you're a very good conversationalist. And I don't know how we got so lucky to have you be a part of this community that that I'm engaged with anyway. So anyway, I'm going to say happy Thanksgiving. It's non-denominational. I'm not going to wish you a Merry Christmas because I know you got some Muslim fucking wranglings and whatnot in your fucking background, but that's fine. I'm not going to judge you for that.
You act like they don't do Christmas. Come on.
Do they? I don't know. I don't study that. I do not know.
Well, but it's the only thing that gets me is all these generalizations that people meet. People are just people everywhere, and
Hold on.
And it doesn't matter.
This is an honest question, bro. I'm honest question. Do Muslims put up a Christmas tree?
The one I'm married to does. She likes it.
Okay, fair enough. That's the asked and answered. Merry Christmas, Happy Thanksgiving, happy Kwanzaa, happy fucking whatever it is.
That's right. Right.
Way to get along. There's a
Synovim Godom, Godom, or Sorozdishwom, or whatever they say. Synovim Godom means Happy New Year. Yeah.
it's easier for us to get along than fight, I think. So I'm going to leave with
Well,
that.
no doubt.
2 days. All right. Good night, Sam.
Yep. Yep. Thank you for calling. And there he goes. Well, I wanted to get to for sure I wanted to get for sure to the Lavrov deal because Lavrov, he later in the day, I was reading you that timeline before of all the events of the day that have been going on, and I wanted to get to because Peskov had a bit. Dmitry Peskov said that the U.S. peace plan would be a very good basis for negotiations. Right now, the only substantive thing is the American plan, Trump's plan. And according to him, the draft of the proposal, which had been shared with Russia, was developed in part based upon the understandings reached in Anchorage in August between Putin and Trump. And he said, we remain completely open to the negotiation process, and we are interested in achieving our goals through diplomatic means. Then, French President Emmanuel Macron said the U.S. plan to end the conflict is a step in the right direction. And he said, we want peace, but not a peace that is in essence capitulation, which puts Ukraine in an impossible situation, which gives Russia all the freedom to continue to go further, including to other European countries. See, this is the BS that he's talking. Moscow doesn't have any intention of going in anywhere else in Western Europe, and there's no reason to think that they are. And people who are saying that they believe that, I think, are, I would use the word disingenuous, but I think they're just flat out liars. They don't believe that. And if they do, they're morons or listening to the wrong people. And so it's funny to me when you see things like that because Russia has been very clear about what they and why. And so there was also discussion that went back and forth all day today of Zelensky coming to Washington to talk to Trump by the end of the week. And then they put it off till next week. Then it was this week again. And but Kyiv is looking to organize Zelensky's visit at the earliest suitable date, still in November, to complete the final steps and make a deal with Trump. Now, this came from Umarov. The U.S. and Ukrainian delegations reached a common understanding on the core terms in Geneva. And so we don't know what it's going to be. Now, Lavrov, this is what I wanted to get to because Lavrov, I watched it was probably an hour that I watched with him. And it was him and a Belarusian foreign minister. I don't think he was the president. I think he was a foreign minister. And so they were talking all about cooperation between Minsk and Moscow and steps that they have made to do these things. And afterward, they had a press conference, and he and I translated it for you. I'm going to read a certain part of it, but I have to get to it. But I'm going to give you the short story version of it right now. He said that Moscow is waiting for Washington to provide it with the interim version of the U.S. peace plan, which has been coordinated with Ukraine and Western Europe, according to Lavrov. Politico reported earlier that the U.S. proposal was reduced from 28 points to 19 as a result of the discussion with the Ukrainians in Geneva over the weekend. And sensitive issues regarding territorial concessions by Kyiv were removed. But according to Lavrov, Moscow so far has only seen the initial version, and it was obtained through unofficial channels. And it has not been officially communicated to us, but we are ready as President Putin said, to discuss specific clauses. So, and I like how he usually puts things together because he really is a professional diplomat, and he don't like um, talking. And so he did an interview, and Maria Zakharova did an interview as well. But I want to get to the Lavrov um, press conference of Sergei Lavrov and uh, Ryzhenkova um, from Belarusia. Let's see. I want to get to where they were talking about, and it was a long statement. Let's see. I have a question. I got to get to the right question. Um, let's see. Regarding the Ukrainian issue, we discussed it yesterday in an informal setting. This is the question. Um, is this a new Minsk process, and who would participate in it? And he said, and this is Lavrov, a few days ago in a meeting with the permanent members of the Security Council, our assessment remained valid in the sense that the key provision of Trump's plan were based on the understandings reached in Anchorage at the Russian American summit in August. And these principles are generally reflected in the plan. We welcome this, as President Putin said, because after Anchorage, when we thought these understandings had already been formalized, there was a long pause. And now the pause has been interrupted by the introduction of this document. And he said, we have it, but it has not been officially transmitted to us. It's only come through unofficial channels. But we are naturally ready, as the president said, to discuss the specific wording because a number of issues require clarification. So far, we have not received from our American colleagues the version that is being speculated about in the media. Those who engage in this kind of megaphone diplomacy, of course, have far from noble goals, and they don't hide it. Macron spoke here the other day and said that Trump's plan is unacceptable because it's a capitulation to Russia, for Ukraine, he means. Someone else is making a statement like this as well. Everything should depend on Ukraine's willingness to agree to this or that agreement. That's it. But serious diplomats, and here's where he goes. I like it. This is why I like listening to him because he just tells it like it is. And he says, but serious diplomats discuss such matters as diplomats are supposed to, confidentially, until a final agreement is reached. Those who are trying to process the documents submitted, first of all, they were deliberately leaked to the media to get this hype. And those who are orchestrating this hype, they, of course, aren't hiding it either. They want to undermine Donald Trump's efforts. Now, this is Sergei Lavrov saying all this. They want to twist his plan in their own way, as I wanted to say in a joke once, but decided not to mention it. Therefore, in this sense, we have channels of communication with our American colleagues, and they are being used, and we are awaiting their version, which they consider an interim version in terms of the completing the phase of coordinating this text with the Europeans and the Ukrainians. Then we will see what happens. Because if the spirit and letter of the Anchorage Agreement on the key understandings we recorded are extinguished, then of course the situation is fundamentally different. But so far, I repeat, no one has officially communicated anything to us. And then he said something about Belarus not being entitled to it. And then he said that or they weren't involved in them. But then he went back to the question of the person we're talking about, the Minsk agreements that came up and that happened before. There was Minsk I and Minsk II, and these are the ones that France and Germany said that they weren't going to honor, and all they were doing previously with Minsk I and Minsk II was giving Ukraine time to gear up for war. And so he talked about that for a bit. He said, when the Minsk agreements were reached after 20 hours of negotiation between the leaders of Russia, Ukraine, France, and Germany, President Lukashenko of Belarus personally did a great deal to organize the work in such a way that it could be completed successfully. And of course, no one back then, sitting in the middle of the night in the palace of the Republic of Minsk, would have imagined that the German and French leaders, Mr. Merkel and Mr. Holland, that's who was there then, were simply sitting there and falsifying the negotiations, which they admitted later. Both of them, along with a third participant, Poroshenko, who was the guy from Ukraine, admitted a year and a half ago that they had no intention of implementing those agreements at all, despite the fact that the Security Council approved the agreements. They declared they needed to buy time to pump Ukraine with weapons so that Ukraine could dig in 5 stories underground in Donbass, which once again demonstrates they had no intention of abandoning the use of force. Therefore, yes, of course, Alexander Lukashenko and our Belarusian friends played a role in the process the last time. A few days later, the Ukrainians proposed negotiations, and our friend in Belarus provided the Belaruskaya Pushcha, where several rounds, that's the presidential residence, where several rounds took place. And the fact that everything was later moved to another location due to the whims of the Ukrainians does not diminish the significance of the role that Belarus played. The other location is Istanbul, as you and several rounds were concluded in Istanbul. Therefore, every time progress is made and agreements are reached, either interim or more stable long-term ones, these agreements have fallen through. And now, and this is a long answer to the question, but he goes, and now when our European colleagues loudly declare there will be no new Minsk and nothing can be decided without Europe, because all of this directly concerns Europe, and Europe has in fact failed on all counts starting in 2014. It was Europe. What is my computer doing? It was Europe that presided over the agreement on the settlement plan in February 2014 between Yanukovych and the opposition. It was Europe that put a guarantor's signature on the document that Yanukovych and the opposition signed back in 2014. It was Europe that morning when the opposition, in violation of the entire signed document, seized the government building in Ukraine he's talking about. It was Europe that threw up its hands and said, in response to our questions, why are you, the guarantors, silent and not holding the opposition accountable? And they said, you know, sometimes democracy takes very unusual forms and twists. Now, I've heard this story before, but he says it the same just about every time. And he said, and that's all. And it was Europe that destroyed the Minsk agreements, as we now know. They openly admit this through France and Germany, and through them, the European Union, who were all guarantors. It was Europe, admittedly represented by Boris Johnson, that Europe took the same position, that dissuaded Zelensky from signing the agreements that the Ukrainian delegation itself proposed in Istanbul in April 2022. This is when this all should have been done. So Europe, they now say, don't do anything without us. He says, you guys already had your chance. You didn't take advantage of those opportunities. You simply wasted them. Only when I watched it, he didn't say you simply wasted them. The word he used is more like you pissed them away. You blew it. You did nothing, and it's a harsher word than you wasted it. And now, when Europe declares, Macron made an aggressive statement today that the problem in Ukraine is Russia, according to Macron. Russia is engaged in a strategic confrontation with Europeans, and we must prove that we will never surrender in the face of a force that threatens us. That's what Macron said. He stated that after settlement, they plan to send troops to Kyiv and Odessa. And he did say that. Macron's an idiot. And he said, we're going to, after this deal is made, we're going to send troops to Kyiv and to Odessa. And he says, well, these are just dreams that he have, and it have nothing to do with peaceful settlement. So when Europeans say we must be with Europe, with Ukraine to the end, because Ukraine is fighting for European values, this is what they are confessing. This means that Europe, I'm sorry to read all this, but it was a great answer. This means Europe is encouraging Nazism, which is legalized in Ukraine. The ideology and practice of Nazism are all legalized. This means Europe is encouraging racism, which takes the form of legislative bans on the Russian language and anything Russian culture, media, and the economic ban on the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. I've told you about that before. It was the Russian Orthodox, but they made it be Ukrainian. And then, since they're subservient to Moscow, they were getting rid of them too. He said, so these are the European values that Europe or Ukraine is defending on behalf of Europe. Therefore, in this case, we see countries that can play a constructive role as mediators. These include Belarus and Turkey. And President Putin recently discussed all of this with President Erdogan, who is interested in helping create a platform. It wasn't us who rejected Istanbul platform. The Ukrainians did. We still haven't received a response from them to the proposal to create 3 working groups because they complained that only the humanitarian aspects of the situations were ever discussed in Istanbul, and no one was talking about the interests or issues that are directly and crucially related to the settlement. We proposed, let's create 3 groups: humanitarian, political, and military. Their answer? There hasn't been one instead. He says, that's not what happened in July of this year. There was no response. They just complained about low-level delegations. We proposed significantly increasing the level of delegations in Istanbul. But still, complete silence. Therefore, when people say, as Macron here quoted, that we, Russia, are the only red line separating us from settlement, well, the president has already commented on some of the antics of our European neighbors, which in general are aimed only at distracting their electorate from their completely failed policies, economic and social development, and the interest of the population. And he says, excuse me, then he talks a little bit about why Belarus is an important part of there. And he says, well, right now, there can be no talk of any mediation with France or Germany at all. Among the mediators, as I said, we value the position of Belarus, we value the position of Turkey, we value the position of Hungary, which is eager to host the Russia-US summit that President Trump proposed to hold in Budapest. And of course, we value the position of the United States, which is the only one of the, so to speak, leaders of the Western world, unlike London, Brussels, Paris, Berlin, to take the initiative and find ways or try to find ways to a settlement. And we appreciate that. And I repeat once again, and especially note in the initiative in this Trump plan, we have seen from the 28 points that we have, but we have not seen any other version. But most importantly, this Trump plan does reflect the key understandings of the Alaska summit. So, a very long answer by Lavrov, but I wanted to include that because he he spoke for a little while, and you never get that. You never get that in the media here on the West in the West. And then there was a question about the BBC asked one. They said the BBC question was, Sergei Viktorovich, could you elaborate? You said the American side hasn't handed over an updated version of the plan, right? But there are reports that the Russian-American talks on Ukraine are currently underway in Abu Dhabi, right? And so it would be logical to assume that Russia is already aware of the new version. What can you tell us about the talks in Abu Dhabi, and what is the composition of the Russian delegation? So, and how close do you think a diplomatic settlement of the conflict is? So, Lavrov says, we have permanent channels of communication with the Americans. President Putin mentioned this when he assessed Trump's peace plan. We do not hide it, but our diplomacy is used to working professionally. This is where he rips up again on Western journalists. And professional diplomacy consists, as I mentioned before, of not leaking information or allowing leaks until a final agreement is reached. But those who, this is a bad translation, who respect diplomacy and politics in Europe are doing exactly the opposite. Meaning they're doing it all, online through tweets or through leaks of information. They're not doing it as professional diplomats are. And he complains about this a lot from the West, that everything is, this is where he gets to the comment about it's kind of a shotgun diplomacy. He calls it something like that. So the purpose of these leaks and constant speculation and rumor mongering is only one. In this case, that purpose is to undermine Donald Trump. Now remember, this is Sergei Lavrov saying this. And they want to get rid of his initiative insofar as it replicates the understanding that we reached in Anchorage. And nobody is hiding it. So you can read what is his name? Macron. It didn't translate it right, but the Prime Minister of England, Macron, and other people, including the Brussels bureaucracy. We don't do that. We want to act as is customary among foreign policy officials. Negotiate confidentially before announcing what you've agreed to. Any other approach means exposing useful initiatives to the risk of attack by those who seek to undermine them. And they do this in the media, including, releasing things specifically to certain media, and including your corporation. The guy who answered or who asked the question was from the BBC. He said, there have been such examples recently from you. We have a much different approach. As I've said, there are channels for communication, he means, but we prefer to engage in diplomacy rather than wagging our tongues in an attempt to provoke and undermine certain positive and promising initiatives. That's why, while we are not rushing to our American colleagues, we have waited a very long time after Anchorage. We have talked to them, simply reminded them that we are committed to that understanding. And it's good that they may finally, by putting forward their initiative, Donald Trump's plan, confirm their commitment to the understanding in Minsk, to what extent they will defend this position and to what extent they will be able to resist attempts to lead them astray by Europe, he means. We don't yet know. We hope that when the United States considered its consultations with the Ukrainian regime and the Europeans, they will inform us. And we hope that this will be in the very near future. And he said, and then the BBC guy goes, but you didn't answer my question. He said, you didn't confirm the fact that there are negotiations going on in Abu Dhabi. And Lavrov says, I answered you, and we conclude the press conference. So it was a good press conference. I liked watching it. It wasn't too horribly long. And even the guy from BBC, it was BBC Russia, I guess, because he spoke Russian. It was a pretty good deal, and a pretty good conversation. So I wanted to go through, excuse me, this joke that people are trying to put out on this side of the planet that Ukraine is winning, and so the main parts are the most active parts of the battlefield right now. Zaporizhia, and they basically in the south, and there's Pokrovsk, Mirnograd, Huliapolya, where Ukraine is losing, and so Mirnograd is a crushing defeat according to just about everything that you see. And the Russian forces have pushed into and around Mirnograd. They are in there, but they have a complete operational encirclement of Ukrainian forces. And there were said to be, between Pokrovsk and Mirnograd, something like 12,000 soldiers. Now, that was a month ago. And they hadn't closed the lid on what they call the cauldron yet. But there are reports, plenty of them, of organized surrenders by Ukrainian soldiers and foreign mercenaries, not just ones and twos, but signs of mass capitulation in these areas. And Ukrainian General Staff is still ordering encircled units to hold and counterattack, which is the exact same thing they did in Bakhmut and Artyomov, which was Artyomovsk. And but now it's far worse with manpower and morale as low as it is. So the line from the videos, the Ukrainian groups in this sector are militarily doomed, and everyone on the front knows it. It is only Kyiv's politicians that keep this stuff in place. And so let's look at Pokrovsk and the Donbass front even more broadly, with Mirnograd cracking. Russian forces are in a position to roll up the whole Pokrovsk grouping, which includes Mirnograd, and clear the rest of Pokrovsk, which is pretty much closed anyway. The Donbass campaign is portrayed, even by me, as methodical, grinding Russian advances. It's not a stalemate. It's not settlement by it is settlement by settlement. And logistics and road junctions are being taken, eliminated. They're bombing the crap out of them and destroying the people. It's become a habit and a process. Just like any factory process, you do it the same every single time. And Russia's been doing it the same every single time. So the Donbass, the Ukrainian troops in adjacent sections, regions, like Solidova, places like that, are anybody around there they're also extremely exposed, and Russia is advancing pretty steadily there. So the point is, this isn't the loss of Pokrovsk is not an isolated setback. It's the plan. It's how it works, and it's going to come along. And it's a structural collapse of the entire Ukrainian line, and everybody knows it when you take that, because you could be blocked from now. The only way you can get you cannot do anything up the Dnieper River, the Ukrainians, I mean, and so they've lost a collapse on that side, and Russia has blocked off most of the main roads to get into Pokrovsk and Mirnograd. So the Zaporizhia area is parallel to the Donbass, and Russians are storming that city too, and gains are happening. And the Ukrainian dream or fake counteroffensive that they were talking about, so they could have something to talk about in Geneva, is they think they're going to be driving to the Azov coast. I mean, everybody is openly mocking mocking that plan because they can't do it. That window was closed long ago, and now Russia is grinding back, anything they may have lost. Excuse me. Zaporizhia fighting is another theater where Russian forces are winning both in the Donbass and on the southern front. These missile and drone campaigns are kicking the crap out of them. Russia's large drone and missile strikes on Ukrainian targets and always infrastructure and military. Ukrainian drones are attacking Russian cities with um, focus on they want to make people feel it. They've been hitting residential places pretty regularly. So the Western media spotlights Russian strikes, but they don't do anything at all when civilians are killed by Ukrainians. They don't even talk about it, or they minimalize it, rationalize it, say, well, it's war. Well, Russia is never intentionally um, firing upon apartment complex or anything like that. So if a Russian drone clips an apartment block, here in the West, that'll become a war crime. But if a Ukrainian drone does it, it's a symbolic resistance. Remember that one where they took cluster rounds? I talk about this all the time. Some Ukrainians sent over cluster rounds on a Sunday afternoon on a Crimean beach to blow people up. And that's what they did. And they used cluster rounds, which are used for personnel to maximize the destruction of personnel. That's what you do to defeat the infantry. You don't do it on a beach in Crimea on a Sunday. And these mass surrenders near Mirnograd are this is a crack in Ukrainian willingness to fight, including foreign mercenaries which are there. Ukraine is running on older, less trained, force mobilized men. The experienced units all got chewed up long ago in places like Bakhmut, Avdiivka, and now in Pokrovsk and Mirnograd. And the leadership, if you want to call it that, in Ukraine is increasingly detached from this battlefield reality. And they're issuing fight to the last man orders from their comfortable chairs in Kyiv. And while, everybody's just quickly surrendering. So I'm not so sure what's going to happen with this peace plan. I hope the rewrites that are the plan. This commentary from a couple other guys say that this is a Trump era peace plan that can or seeks to impose a ceasefire along the front lines, address security guarantees for Ukraine and Russia, provide a framework for sanction relief and economic normalization. So this claim or this plan was quietly developed and then buried. Once it became associated with Trump, they want to kill it. All of the deep media and the deep state, because it requires Kyiv to accept neutrality and the loss of its territory. And Kyiv and Brussels have been very vocal about amending that plan. They are relying heavily on rewriting and watering down most of Trump's original terms. And the new European version is a 19-point plan that was taken to Geneva. It removes any recognition of Russian control over any new territories. I mean, that alone means that this plan is not going to be accepted by Russia. And they want to say that there cannot, that Ukraine can't be neutral. Kaya Kallas, or was it von der Leyen, got on TV and says no state should be forced to declare that they're neutral. Well, what happened to Czechoslovakia? What happened to who got to choose in Kosovo? As I quote Maria Zafarova from there last night, who got to who overtook them and divided them, and still have kings there. Go back and listen to my kings discussion on what we have done, or what the NATO has done, what the Security Council has done in other states, and you should start with Kosovo. And you could go back even further than that. But here's what they've done. The Europeans, they've taken a semi-realistic plan submitted in Alaska by Trump and Putin, stripped out anything Russia actually wants, and then act surprised when Moscow says no, because Moscow's not going to agree to any of that. So they had in Geneva the U.S., Ukraine, and the EU without Russia. There's a Geneva negotiation trap where Americans, Ukrainians, worked in conjunction with just themselves, didn't invite the Russians, and then Peskov and Ushakov. Moscow knows about these talks, but they weren't formally invited, and they didn't receive any official text. Lavrov said he hasn't seen any part of it. No one's communicated anything to us. They're designing a peace plan like it's a group project where you don't have to invite the guy that you're wanting to make peace with. The unmovable sticking point, several of them actually, but one of the big ones, one of the key provisions in the new plan tries to postpone NATO, like Trump. The original plan was no NATO for these guys. They want to freeze the conflict now and talk about NATO membership later. But for Moscow, this is backward. NATO expansion and Ukraine's neutrality are one of the core issues for them. So here we are at an obvious impasse. This is never going to resolve, and so Ukraine is going to capitulate unless NATO increases the level of conflict. So, the West says cease fire now. We'll talk about NATO later. Russia says no. You talk NATO now and security guarantees first, or there is no point in talking about any of this. And so, let's look at what Russia's stated goals are in the transcript, both from Lavrov's commentary and Russia's conditions that they've been talking about forever. They want to demilitarize Ukraine. No NATO weapons, infrastructure on the territory that gets to point to Russia, right? No housing of bases, anything like that. And they want a neutral and non-aligned Ukraine with no NATO membership, and more importantly, no NATO bases. And JR, I'm sure, remembers this because it was on the show that he was on when I talked to a representative on the phone from Missouri, and she said she had been to. There were bases all over Ukraine that she had been to them, and I don't know how that helps the people of the lake, but that's what she did, and so they don't want any NATO bases or any alignment with NATO. Russia insists that Ukraine and the West recognize the territorial realities. I mean, they are what they are. Donbass and the other incorporated regions have voted, and they voted to go with Russia. And then they want security guarantees so that Ukraine doesn't go after them anymore, because that's what they were doing. They were slaughtering Russians in the Donbass. So Budanov was in the EU, and he was the back channel that they were talking about in that Lavrov interview. So Budanov is meeting Russian officials in the UAE. The head of the Ukrainian intelligence, Kirill Budanov, is said to have met Russian representatives in the UAE. So not in Istanbul, not anywhere else, but they're discussing the 24. It's a back channel, but the prisoner, they were talking about prisoner exchange, but Kyiv is talking directly to Moscow on something, and this is a first in a while. Even as Zelensky's public line is no negotiation without our ultimatums being met. Well, his ultimatums aren't going to get very far. So what this Budanov thing probably means is that there's going to be some kind of instant or immediate POW changes, dead body changes. So it'd be safer for both sides if you can package all this as humanitarian. And there's possibly a temporary ceasefire, safe corridors, and other technical arrangements, but falling short of full peace. So when they tell you there are no talks going on, there are already talks. You just don't know all of the things that they're talking about or what they're willing to admit publicly. So it's important for what, remember the one that said that nobody can be prosecuted. That's important for all these people who stole all this money under the guise of democracy in Ukraine. So when they tell you that there are no talks going on, they're full of crap. And what are they saying inside Ukrainian leadership, though? According to Budanov, that does signal a fraction within Kyiv, because intelligence and military people who see the battlefield reality and want deals on concrete issues, they want prisoners, rotations, local ceasefires, whatever. But the political class around Zelensky is still selling this BS total victory and these peace formula, victory formula, all of these that Zelensky has been pushing forever. So the people who actually send men into the meat grinder are already negotiating, but the PR teams in Kiev and Brussels really don't want to admit that. And Moscow has definitely rewritten who is killing these peace talks. That interview that I read you part of with Lavrov and Ryzhanka, this press conference, they talked about this high level of foreign coordination, and Belarus is a frontline ally for Russia, and also in confrontation with the West. And they were the mediator of the Minsk agreement in 2022. And the talks in 2022. The Minsk agreements were long ago. So we already have talked about those in detail and what he had said. Well, Lavrov did another interview that I watched with the Franco-Russian Association, a friendship between France and Russia, is what they are allegedly discussing, right? And so, I'm sorry, Lavrov tells the same thing. It's like a recycling show. But he's very consistent in what he says, and he said it again today. The West agreed in various Security Council meetings and in NATO texts to individual security. That means not strengthening NATO's security at the expense of others. In practice, NATO has been expanded all the way to Russia's border, ignoring Moscow completely and ignoring their objections and warnings, because we're the biggest, baddest bully on the block. And the Ukrainian crisis is the direct consequence of this decades-long Western behavior. I mean, it's absolutely true that this has been caused by what we are doing. You know, that's what it is. Um, so Lavrov described Zelensky's government as pursuing the extermination of everything Russian in Ukraine. And Lavrov always talks about this. Putin talks about it fairly frequently. The language laws are against Russian language, attacking this Russian Orthodox Church and their pastors is bad, and then this Nazism glorification of people like Bandera, who killed 100,000 people, 100,000 Poles, 110,000 is what they say that the Bandera group killed for the Nazis, and so they still are fighting for the same realities they were fighting for back in 2022. You don't have to agree with them, but they're definitely consistent. So they will get, and they've said, we'll get what we want one way or the other. If it has to be by capitulation, so be it. And so he says the SVO is, special military operation, is in response to this systemic discrimination against Russian speaking and the failure of the West to back the Minsk agreements and the Budapest agreement, all of these things. So, and he loves to bitch about this is that Boris Johnson, he mentioned him all the time, and then the CIA director Bill Burns coming to Moscow with warnings in late 2021, essentially saying that Ukraine will choose its alliances and the U.S. will back it, saying they're joining NATO, so screw you, basically. And that happened in late 2021. And Lavrov talks about it all the time. And then Boris Johnson took a trip to Kyiv in 2022 and killed the Istanbul peace talks and said they will be with you to the last Ukrainian, basically. So Americans and Britain and the British blocked peace when it was still possible back in 2022. So, or Lavrov said that, and he says, so quit blaming Moscow for the continuation of this war that you guys started, basically. And Macron says France as an enemy versus reality person. Lavrov downright mocked Macron's line that Russia has chosen France as an enemy. It's complete crap. Nobody's ever said that or taken any actions in that regard. So he points to working with Russia even today with decades of cooperation and energy projects to get together. And he says it's Paris and Brussels that chooses confrontation under U.S. pressure. And so basically, from my point of view, I agree with this. You don't have to spend 30 years doing business with somebody or not, and then discover that they're your enemy. If they're your mortal enemy, they have been the whole time. That's just politics. And, it's no special revelation. The Western elites, he says, are trapped by their own propaganda. I agree completely with this point of view. He said that the Western political elite built their career on the slogan that Russia must be defeated and it's on the brink of collapse anyway. All we have to do is push them and they'll fall over. That's what Lavrov said in this interview with a French magazine. He said, now they can't walk all that back without admitting that they misled their own voters. That is exactly where we are. We have misled everyone, just like always. We talk about democracy. We talk about dictatorships. We kill Gaddafi. We kill Saddam Hussein. We're trying to get rid of Maduro in Venezuela, which is a totally separate topic that I hope to get to tomorrow night. And I mean, it's just a bunch of crap that they have going on. And Europe, of course, is all up in arms, but they aren't defending Ukraine. They're defending their own bad positions economically. But energy and industry are killing them in Europe. Europe's pre-war prosperity is repeatedly tied to Russian energy, cheap Russian energy, or raw materials. But now with sanctions and out and cut off Russian gas, and the deindustrialization in Germany and everywhere else in Europe, these are self-inflicted wounds. These have nothing to do with Russia. But now they're making it even worse by prolonging a losing war in Ukraine. So figures like Friedrich Merz criticizing U.S. and NATO line, and some European ministers privately admit that a Russian victory might be economically less catastrophic than endless war. But the EU foreign policy leadership, like Kaja Kallas, is painted as hysterical, inexperienced, and more loyal to Washington than their own European populations. But that's not really true, because they don't want to be loyal to Donald Trump either. They're waiting for him to collapse. So Europe is sacrificing its own industry, its own living standards of its residents to prevent peace that it could have had years ago. So it's just nonsense. If this is how victory looks, I sure would hate to see how defeat looks, and I'm gonna hopefully get to Maduro and the rest of Mirnograd tomorrow when we chat. Let's see what the latest update is on time, because there were other people, like only Russia can decide what happens to its own sovereign assets in that frozen account in the EU. Said this was Maria Zakharova said, and she condemned President Macron, who criticized the plan. She said, those who are illegally holding funds belonging to the Russian Federation must return them if they do not want to be branded as European thieves and face the harsh responses for their crimes, she said on Telegram. That was Zakharova. And she said, Europeans must decide what they will do with the Russian central bank assets, as they are held by Europeans, is what Macron said. So the bulk of these assets are in Brussels. And so if they're not European decision, it would be the Brussels guy. And so far he said no. So let's see what happened with Kyiv was rejected the whole draft proposal twice today. And once it was saying because too few in numbers. Carolyn Leavitt had some long ex posts that we may get to tomorrow. And then Lavrov's speech, they spent a lot of time on. And then Trump gave a deal, and what he said was that a peace deal in Ukraine is very close, he announced. We're going to get there. We're very close to getting a deal, he said at a pre event at the White House today. Yep. And Putin came out too, and he said the spirit of Anchorage, if it's erased from the plan, that Washington ends up bringing the talks with Russia, things would be radically different if they don't stay the same as they did before, pre-Istanbul. And let's see where else we can go here. We only got a minute left, or less than that. Well, I appreciate you being on the show, and I hope we can join again tomorrow night. and I am very glad that you have been here with me this evening. So let's see. I don't know how much longer we got here. Yeah, we should be ending up here pretty quick. Sorry about that. I'm doing it remote still from Florida, and I have a little trouble getting to where I was going to go. So I very much appreciate you being with me tonight, and hope you join us again tomorrow. Have a very pleasant night. Goodbye.